Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 34 of Diary of a Sales Engineer. I'm Ryan Kruger, joined by my favorite co host.
Samir Sahai Kausar, and today we have a very exciting guest with us. He's a friend of mine. I got the pleasure of working with him in the past. He was actually one of my first SE mentors, and now he is running one of the coolest startups in the AI space. Jeff Wang, welcome to the show. And first off, I've been following your career for a while since we met back in 2020 when we were both SEs, all the same thing. Now you are the CEO of one of the, coolest AI startups in the space. Just walk us through that journey of going from SE to CEO. What biggest question on my mind?
Yeah, I think, and by the way, thanks for having me on. I'm happy to always jam with you guys. I think the main difference of like SE versus other roles is it kind of requires some sort of a versatility, right? You need to be able to speak to the technology, know the details of the technology, but also talk like a normal human being with a lot of, even execs all the way to engineers in some cases. And that kind of translates well to just being a generalist in general, right? Like doing a lot of different other roles at the company in operations, marketing, finance. I would be comfortable with an SE kind of taking on a lot of those roles because they've kind of had that versatility. And I think that translates well to just like eventually just, what's the word of like not narrowing, but like broadening your focus of the company because you do have this versatility and hopefully tackling other problems more and more. And eventually, like when you're growing very fast, if you are ever part of a startup that's growing, like hiring one person a day and revenue is growing 10x, every quarter or two, then you have to start broadening your scope and hiring people to cover different functions. And that is how I would kind of describe the journey from a SA to or SE to CEO.
So I guess for those who don't know your full background, I know you have dabbled in the engineering side, the product side, the sales engineering side, and now running a company. What has been your favorite type of role? Because I feel like you've touched almost all of them.
I think that actually, to be honest, like the solution engineer is probably my favorite role because you do get to dabble in the technology and then you also get to speak to it. And then demoing is one of the most thrilling experiences in some cases. There's some high stakes demos you have to do. Sometimes it's like the CEO of a very large company and it's like do or die. If that demo breaks and your story falls short, and a lot of it is on your shoulders too. I think that is probably the most exciting kind of times that I can remember of being part of like multiple startups doing this role. But yeah, I think like of all the other roles, in general, my personality is just to get really bored very quickly on things, and that kind of forces me to be curious on technology and explore other roles. And I think that is maybe a trait that is both positive and negative. I think a lot of times I join a company and they're like, I don't know what to do with Jeff.
Yeah.
He's just he's bored again, but like I don't know where to put him, and it is tough to be in that spot a lot of times. But a lot of and then again, if you're in a scaling company, then it's okay because there's always a lot of work to tackle, right?
So I think like just like pulling on that thread a little bit and diving a little bit deeper, like looking at your background and how you went from SE into product into this sort of role of like head of business over at Windsurf, like, what skills set you up for that transition into this role and into the CEO role that you eventually ended up getting into? Like, what were the most important skills that you think you had?
By the way, I will say the CEO role was a little bit of luck or misfortune, and some people might frame it, but the versatility aspect is very important. So being able to be dependable on any sort of situation where you do need to know the technology or you do need to speak to it is very, very important. And just like we talked about, this is like exactly what a solutions engineer does, right? And we've kind of tweaked that formula a bit to be more like deployed engineering, meaning the solution engineer actually does a lot of the actually low level work of plugging systems in and training people and making sure they're successful. But that is really the what it takes. And when you kind of go from like IC to leadership, right? You need to have that broadened focus of what's going on. And very few people in the company can do both, right? But very few can like really speak to the technology and really handle the technology and then also change the narrative around it where anybody can understand it. And that if you think about it, that's like most of what leadership does at a company. Obviously there's some like personal and personnel aspects to it. I'm also like the chief therapy officer of the company, I say. I talk to a lot of the employees that have things on their mind and try to figure out resolutions there. But most of the, I would say like 95% of my job is speaking to the story of the technology and how it can help solve problems, right? And that is really what the role of a solution engineer is.
Yeah, so I think this is super cool, and I think this is really helpful for me to understand. And I think one thing that for our audience, like at times, I think sales engineering can kind of get put into this box, right, where we brand ourselves as the technical resource as a part of the pre-sales motion into that sort of post-sales motion. And what that does, though, unfortunately, is like if you only ever exist in that box of being the technical resource, you no longer really get your voice to have a seat at the table. And I think that's where like every SE listening to this, like make sure that you're not sticking yourself into that box. Like figure out ways for you to network internally with everybody at the company, broaden your horizons, broaden your skill set, take opportunities as they come. So if somebody says, "Hey, we want to loop you into this customer support. Hey, we want to loop you into this marketing event." Take those opportunities because it starts to allow you to have a seat at the table. But for you, Jeff, like how did you navigate not being just that technical resource and making it to having a seat at the table?
Listen, every company, and again, a lot of this depends on if the startup is growing and is kind of semi-successful. Otherwise, everybody's maybe focused on like reducing churn or solving other problems. But if you're in a growing startup with like the revenue is growing, the customer base is growing, there are a lot of new problems all the time. Like every single situation that if you're growing, there's more problems to have to solve. And if you think about it again, like the sales engineer has the skills probably to handle it, like you said, oh, I have to send someone to speak at this conference. Okay, like I'll send a sales engineer probably if execs can't go. Or oh, look, we have a new feature and we have to write the documentation for it on the website and we got to get it out like tonight. And the engineers are all slammed. Else are you going to turn to? You have to go to the sales engineer. And the great thing is like the sales engineers that are really stepping up and like volunteering to do this stuff are the ones that get a seat at the table, right? Because they're the ones that identify the gaps and try to plug it with their own like knowledge and skills, right? So to get a seat at the table, it's really just identifying the gaps in the company and going and solving them. And a lot of times there will be people that identify gaps and try to delegate. And that is like, obviously, in a big company that might be okay, but in a startup, you kind of want to just plug the gap yourself. And sometimes you just don't tell anybody that you plugged it. And then you say like, hey, listen, like I saw this problem and I solved it. And that's like, hey, like, at least for me, like rely on a lot of those people because I know they're proactive and trying to find these things to solve. And when you grow, there's gonna be a lot of problems that come up, and you kind of need everybody to step up to identify the problems. And the people that don't identify the problems are the ones that are boxed in and unable to grow their careers because they're being told what to do and what to say. And that is a trap you don't want to fall in. You kind of always want to be aware of what's going on around the company and try to find problems to solve.
So, kind of on that front of, I think what was hard, at least for me when I was starting off in my career, was being able to identify and like locate these problems. Because like when you are growing, they're popping up, but sometimes I didn't know what I didn't know. So like when you were trying to figure out where, like what's going to be the highest impact problem, I guess. Like there's so many problems, and it's like if I'm going to go spend my time, how can I know this one is going to be a higher impact than this one in order to maybe figure out what's going to be the best problem to solve? Because there's so many when you're in a scaling company that's going so fast.
And the best is to solve the problems that you run into the most. And most likely, a lot of other people in the company are running into them. Samir, do you remember when we worked together, how much automation I put in place
Yeah.
around the whole company? And that was just because I was like, I kept running into issues getting things done. So I just built a bot around it or I built a flow around it. And I still do that, by the way, at Windsurf. I still build some like automation and bots around the company. So you could start with that and then once you get like visibility, then you start talking to again the CEO or the CRO or the folks that like they know of other problems around the organization, and you just start helping out with those as well. And then again, that will get you the seat on the table because you're the one that's proactively solving their problems. They're going to come to you and rely on you to help. Right.
How do you balance this like fine line though, like within sales engineering where we are pre-sales revenue generating, but we're also looking to fix these sort of problems that pop up, right? Like, hey, like I've noticed this is happening every single time I have a customer deploy. We should probably fix this, create some documentation around it. But then you also have AEs breathing down your neck saying, hey, we got to go drive more revenue. And sales leadership saying, hey, we got to drive more revenue. I can't necessarily have my sales engineers always tied down to like fixing engineering specific problems, but also driving revenue. Like, what does that balance look like?
It depends on if you're solving problems for the AEs as well, right? So the AEs can't locate certain documentation or certain things for the customer, and they depend on the DEs. Maybe the DE, or in our case, the deployed engineer is a sales engineer, right? They can go and help solve that problem for the AE. And you will, again, if there's any kind of roadblock or anything that's a bottleneck, if the sales engineer is solving it, that everybody's going to be happy about that, right? I know like AEs can be a little bit self-serving because that's kind of how they're compensated, but that they'll understand. Like they'll be benefit from some of the work that the sales engineer can go and spread around their kind of.
Yeah, I think that's actually an excellent point of if you're trying to like where to start, like what problems to try and like start solving outside of your domain is like, is there an operations issue during the sales cycle that all of a sudden it takes us a week to spin up an instance for our, POC? How can I bring that down to a day? Like, where is places that I'm touching that is affecting my AE that can help? Like, I remember one of the channels that you had made when we worked together just gave a bunch of deal information, and we were updating all of our deal channels when things would happen within various domains, whether it was Salesforce or like our ticketing desk, and like that automation was super helpful to the revenue team. And I think that also just one that inspired me to think of use cases like that, seeing like what you already built, and that also helped me understand the business at a larger level.
It's actually better if you use the tools the company creates too.
Yeah.
So, at the startup we were at, I built some things to prevent sales from even going into Salesforce. Basically, you can complete all of your things in Slack. And that increased probably the quality of the data in Salesforce because they're just like sitting there in Slack and they're going to update it anyway, right? And then at Windsurf and Cognition, I built this bot just recently that is connected to the data of the customer consumption usage. And now we have this Slack channel called Analytics. And every few minutes, I see someone asking questions about a customer. And I made it so it's so easy to use. You just type in customer and then the name of the customer, and it will just go and give you a report and dashboard and even insights of like how to tackle the next meeting. It might say like, hey, the consumption is going up. You might want to talk about like how to just like start a new contract where you have a bigger discount, bigger contract. And so that kind of thing also doesn't it take that much time. That's just like leveraging agents that your company already builds, and then everybody can benefit, right? So finding those quick wins and obvious wins is the key. And it's not even that I proactively do it. It's like I'm just really blocked as well, and I
Yeah.
see other people being blocked, and it's like if I do this, then everybody is going to be very happy, of course. But really, I'm just trying to get my stuff done, and this will help everyone too.
So like a lot of this, like a common theme I'm seeing, and I've watched you do is you go in and learn like new domains constantly. And one of the questions I have is like, at this point, do you have like a framework that you kind of maybe like a mental model of when you're learning new things? Like you've dove into so many different domains, and like I know on one of the interviews you did, you talked about, oh, I didn't have any like AI experience, so I dove into all the models and I wrote blogs about it so that when I got to that point they could see like my work online. Like how are you learning? Like what are you doing to learn so much?
I honestly, it's just setting it up and trying it out. And a lot of the times, it's something that's gonna blow my mind, right? If I'm setting something up that's boring, obviously, I'm not gonna have any desire to do that. But obviously, like this week, for example, there's this whole Claude bot like thing, and I was traveling, so I haven't been able to set it up. But like normally, I would just like set it up and see how it works and see if the hype is there or not. But I think that's the key is just have that curiosity for the things that might blow your mind, and then I'm always hunting for that mind blowing moment for a lot of these new technologies, and it's always like it's like a great feeling to be like mind blown when you find something. And the reason why I wrote it down in a blog was because I was just trying to get a job in the AI space at the time, and I was pretty confident nobody would hire me because I'm just a random guy on the street. So I had to kind of distill all the knowledge and findings into that blog, then talk to the other founders of those companies, and they were like, oh, okay, this guy's not just some random guy. He's actually does some stuff. But having, again, the key is having the curiosity and just actually getting hands on. And who better than, again, a sales engineer who is like pretty widely versed on getting these things set up, right?
That's so cool because, I think a lot of sales engineers get stuck in this place where you're at a company, you become a principal SE, a senior SE, where you know the most about the product that you sell and the space that you sell into, whether it's fintech, whether it's security. And then you get into this position where you say, like, oh, I'm just a security SE. So I can only go look at other security forward companies. And, you have a new wave of technology like AI pop up, and the security SEs say, I don't know, I just, not my domain. How would I ever get there? Learning these new skills is always a good thing. You're learning new industry domains. It's not impossible, but you got to put your best foot forward, right? Like, you got to go out there, put yourself out, make yourself vulnerable to say, I'm willing to try something new, and just like go for it. Like, even for me in my career, like, I knew nothing about finance, became a sales engineer in finance. I knew nothing about AI, became an SE in AI. Like, you can do it, but look, every single time I've made the switch, like online, researching, studying, watching YouTube's, podcasts, playing around with the tools, you name it. But like, you can't stop. Like, you got to have the same sort of like curiosity that you keep coming back to. And I think naturally SEs have like this amazing, like innate sort of design to say, like, I'm curious, I want to solve problems, I want to help people out. How do I do it? How can I make it better? But it's cool because you don't have to be limited to just one single field for the rest of your life. Like, you can pivot, you can try new things and try new sorts of like industry verticals. It doesn't have to stop in one place.
Now more than ever, you can actually build almost anything. So you can build a project, use Windsurf or any of these vibe coding or other agent tools, and display to the world what you've done. And there's unlimited projects now because the effort to write code now is zero. So it's really about how creative you are on these ideas and showing that to the world and impressing the world, right? And that's how you can kind of branch out into other domains. And again, like there's never been a better time to build a 1 million ARR company as a solo founder, like never in history. When you go for a billion ARR company, then probably you'll hit some competition. But right now, anybody can build almost anything that is at least pretty niche scoped and like low burden and still make money or still get visibility on it. For example, the Cloudbot thing was just some random guy built this thing with available tools. Everybody knows who he is now, and he can go branch off and get a job at an AI company now, right? But you don't have to get that famous. You just like build something that is like very high value and useful, and that probably is enough to get on the radar to work at other companies too if you want to try to branch out.
So how did you actually leverage the blog that you were writing on the AI? Like if we were to get tactical, how did you use that in order to end up at Windsurf or like any other of the companies that you were trying to break into in the AI space?
Well, I literally just wrote a bunch of stuff, and then when I was getting the meeting set up with that company at the time, it was Codium, and I wrote a few pieces, a few articles already. I remember one of them was I fine tuned an entire finance chat I had in Facebook, and that was like 3 gigabytes of text data. Fine tuned it on I think Llama 2 at the time, and then started asking questions about it, and it would like respond in kind of the chat room voice. It actually responded in multiple people at a time, which was funny, but that's how the data was, right? And I put that on the blog. And when I went into the office to chat with the folks, like these are like some of the smartest folks that I've ever met. And I'm like definitely the dumbest guy here. And then these guys are like, oh, it's that guy who fine tuned the chat. Like they knew of the thing because no one had done it yet, like that kind of a scale either. At 3 gigabytes chat was pretty big at the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's just that it's like basically you want to kind of it's kind of like your resume, right? Like the blog is your resume in that case, and you want to like make sure they're aware of it. But it tactically it was to be like, hey, I don't have anything on my resume that's AI, so I should add something there, whether it's content or whether it's some other thing, a project that you vibe code, right? You need to have something that differentiates you from people that all these AI companies are probably getting like thousands of applicants a day, so you just need to have something that stands out and then obviously go through a referral, and then the referral you mentioned like, hey, look at my blog or look at this app I built, and then hopefully that becomes part of like the interview process flow where they just keep mentioning this app you've built. Like I built this options trading app just like maybe a few weeks ago where I did actually deploy a lot of funds to the strategies that it built. But like that's a really good story if you talked about the consequences of like I built this app, here's what I did, and now I've just made 100 grand. It's like, whoa, that's pretty cool. That's I'm curious to talk to this guy more. Probably made like 50 grand though actually. But
Is there a fund I can invest in that option training
Yeah,
bot?
I
it
was thinking
probably
that
won't work
too.
now.
Like, how do we get involved?
Actually, it's funny that the app said to, well, I was trying to like build an app to like identify covered calls so you're looking for the highest implied volatility. And at the time, it was like silver was still like below where it's at now. It was the big silver crash at the time of this filming, but basically bought that with high volatility, and then the silver went up a lot. So I would have made more if I just like held it and sold the top, obviously. But this was a very high probability outcome. And then the second thing I identified was like U.S. oil, which I did buy like last week, and that spiked up. But like because it was covered, it's just a high probability strategy over time. Anyway, that's the detail of that app and the consequences. So yeah, I made about like maybe 50, but anyway, it's like not important.
I mean, that's cool. It's like, I guess, how are you still finding time to tinker like this?
The reality is like I need to keep up to date with all the updates within Windsurf and obviously with Devon and all the other Cognition platform. And I just have to find kind of projects to build each time there's an update. Like I want to at least build something that's real, that has like some output. And in the past I built things like I rebuilt Jira, and I built a lot of Slack bots, and I built a lot of like automation. I told you about the bot that like answers customer
Mhm.
information. So you just pick a project that you find you want to build, and then I use that to learn the product, like to really dog food and understand the newest updates, like what are the latest features and how can I explain those to customers as well. And that's exactly what you guys should be doing too, right? Like sales engineers should be dog fooding the product and trying to understand as much of the new updates as possible and how to like tell the story. And again, like if you build something cool and you talk to the customer about it too, they might also resonate with the product and think of how they could use it in their work environment.
So as you look to hire, sales engineers into your current org, are these the sort of things that you're looking for them to have, like these sort of side projects, and bring them forward to say like, hey, let's take a look at a project that you've done?
Yeah, basically any spike in some of the qualities that they can that that they're like they're strong in some category. But what we've started doing was looking for like ex founders, because you are looking for someone that is good at telling a story, but also got on the weeds in the technology and has felt the grind in some cases. We used to try to hire out of college, and it didn't work out because they didn't know how to talk to like the enterprise language, right? They might just like be saying Gen Z stuff, and you're like, come on, you got to like mature a little bit, right? But overall, you are looking for someone that like is curious and building stuff, and especially if they built a company. So like if they're an ex-founder, right? That is like the ideal sales engineer.
It's so funny because we always say that SEs make great founders, and I guess the reverse is true as well.
Yeah. And by the way, SEs can also make good AEs too. We've had a few SEs that kind of convert to AEs, and they did very well. And they almost don't even need a SE anymore, which is kind of cool. But the opposite is not easier. Like it's harder for an AE to be an SE, right?
100%. I guess what those SEs who've transitioned over to AEs that you've seen like firsthand, are there any like similarities across them? Like if I'm an SE thinking about making the jump to becoming an AE, what are gaps that I would have to fill in order to make that jump successfully? Like
I would
anything
say like the first few meetings are easy. They know the discovery questions to ask. In fact, usually the SE is better at the discovery questions than the AE, because there's like they can go deeper, right, on the technology questions. The gap would probably be later when you're doing like you're mapping out the org chart and seeing who else to hit, and also when you do cold outreach, when you're like spamming a lot of people in email. A lot of people might get like afraid of like just bothering somebody, and the AE is not as afraid. The AE is like, no, I don't care. I'm going to have the CEO send an email to the CEO, other CEO, and embarrass us all. And the SE might feel like against that, right? I can see that happening. And then later on, when you're negotiating for pricing, you're working with procurement. There's like a lot of ambiguity and a lot of uncertainty, and I feel like the SE is more probably against that. Like they probably want more of a framed process and answer very like specific questions rather than going to this like black box where you have no idea what the outcome is going to be, and you have to like kind of do a lot of strategies that might go against what they feel comfortable with, right? So I think that might be the gap if you want to just like flip the switch. But if you're an SC and you're seeing the AE do this 100 times, then it might be a lot easier to make the switch.
So do you see then like the role of sales engineering kind of like migrating in two different paths? Because I know you said internally you refer to sales engineering as deploy engineering. And then you said there's been some SEs that have moved over into like account executive. Are those sort of two distinct roles, or do you still see there being like account executive, SE, and then deploy engineer?
We've actually structured it differently now. So we have deployed engineers, which are really kind of sales engineers that are taking the first meetings, they're doing the demos, they're explaining the technology, they're running workshops, or trying to get people to use the tool and increase adoption. And we've created a new role called Delta Engineer, which is way more in the weeds of kind of plugging in systems and getting very, very specific use cases and actually using the tools to solve those use cases. And the funny thing is that is more of a deployed engineer than the deployed engineering team. But that is kind of the next kind of level of, I would say, the path of a sales engineer to deployed engineer. And then there's an engagement engineer. I guess like we have like a post sales team. And that is also interesting because it could be very high stakes where there's like a $20 million deal and they're only using $1 million worth of consumption, and you have to like get them to that 20 million, right? So that requires very specific technology and handholding to get done. So I think the sales engineer role is just going to branch out more to other types of the sales process. But in terms of getting out of that loop, like getting converting to AE or converting to, in some cases, even a product engineer, I don't think it happens very often to convert back to the engineering team. But yeah, I would say like when you look at folks like for leadership or folks for like, again, if they want to start at their own company, most likely the sales engineer is the one to pick because they're the most well-rounded, right?
And are you seeing this like breakout in like other companies that y'all are working with? Like Ryan and I, on an earlier pod, talked about this like forward deploy engineer, and like that's starting to be a new role that's showing up. Of the companies you're talking to, or like other CEOs, how are they looking at like the sales or engineering organizationally when they're looking at their org charts and thinking about where they should be putting investments in? Like, do you have any insights on that?
I think people are taking forward deployed engineer as a buzzword and like they're trying to implement it, but they don't know what it means.
Yeah.
So I think we've done it especially well just because we've kind of been doing a lot of trial and error of like how to close a deal and like seeing the success rate. And the success rate increases when you spend more time with the customer, believe it or not. And you do need to train a process where there is like a weekly office hours or like there's like a specific adoption metrics that you, if you're not hitting, then you run certain types of, deep dives. And there's like exec kind of alignments where you have to send a deployed engineer to really kind of get in the weeds in some cases and make them successful. So I feel like we are actually executing the forward deployed engineer playbook. We're also like creating it as well. I think Palantir has their version of it where they are also in the weeds and they like make a project successful and get to the endpoint before the deal is closed. And we have a different way of doing it, but it's very like time consuming and in the weeds. And the reason why we do this, by the way, is because these other companies, coding is probably the most competitive space right now, right? Of all the AI verticals. And right now, the way to differentiate is having this deployed engineering team and really having that white glove service and making our customers successful. Like if we don't do that, they're just going to go buy whatever is the safe tool. Although the good news is Windsurf and Cognition and Devin, like it's more and more well known now. When you're just starting out as a new startup and you have like a dozen people trying to close a huge bank, like that's much harder to do. But even then, kind of deployed engineering motion at least gives you a chance. Otherwise, you have no chance. It's like really hard to create a new startup now and try to get like very large enterprise deals.
Those are the fun days though, right? Like when nobody knows what your product is, you don't have the reference customers to just send them off to, you don't have the big logos to say like, hey, look, so and so uses our product. Just, if they use it, you should use it too. Like it makes your sales team have to be like so hungry, so creative, and so passionate about driving the sale forward because you've got to get this company to see the vision with you, like the vision that your CEO and founder has outlined, and really to pass it along to the sales team and say, this is what we need to do. This is, the sort of vision you have to sell, and get another CEO at another company to buy into this and say like, I need this tool. And like, those are the most fun sort of wins. So as you were, at like the early stages of like Codium Windsurf, maybe like, do you have any like stories that you could share with us of like working through some of those early stage challenges?
Yeah, the way to win the first deals is to kind of sell something that nobody else has, but they really, really need. And at the time, it was on-prem AI coding assistant. Like, no, like everyone knew about Copilot, and Copilot was like the big elephant in the room every time we had a conversation. We just targeted companies that couldn't buy Copilot, and like we went to the defense companies, we went to a lot of the banks, and they just weren't allowed to send their data and their IP out into the cloud. So we built a product that we knew they would really want and kind of have no choice but to use than us. And obviously, you still have to build that trust and that enterprise kind of muscle. But that's the way you do it in the very beginning. You don't want to create a product in the very beginning that is kind of competing in a well-known space where there's a lot of very heavy hitters. and you just like are the same product, right? That's like very, very hard to win your first few deals with. But the interesting thing is like when you're the founder or like one of the initial founding team, talking to these customers is like kind of a game of like, okay, what is it they need to hear, and like what is it we need to build, and doing that A/B test of the message and the technology and making your roadmap match is really fun. It was definitely the most fun part of the startup journey. It's like not a lot at stake. You're just like throwing everything on the wall to see what hits. And now it is like, because it's competitive, it's kind of the same thing, but in a different way. It's like you're talking to other customers, trying to hear how, Cursor or like Cloud Code or, OpenAI now, like how are they choosing them or not choosing them, and trying to frame your company in that landscape. And I think it's a very different, it's kind of similar where you're starting to A/B test messages and reframing your product and honestly rebuilding some parts of the product to compete. And it's not as fun though, because you have like hundreds of salespeople now, and you need to like make sure they can tell that story too, right? That's hard. It's hard to like kind of take a message and make sure everybody else has that message. But in the beginning, if you're the only one doing it, then you can try a lot of things, right? But you can't have your hundreds of salespeople try a lot of things. That's not going to scale.
I know you've been in multiple startups and been in ones that have succeeded, ones that have failed. And I think one of the biggest things is everyone talks about like product market fit and like getting to product market fit. And in your experience, like one, what have you seen work to get there? And two, like what does it feel like when you've gotten it? Because I've heard people almost like have talked about it like, oh yeah, you know when you just know that you got the product market fit. How do you know?
Yeah, well, but one of the biggest traps, by the way, in the AI era, is believing you have product market fit because you are giving away something for free and there's a lot of traction. That is the biggest trap in the AI coding space, at least. There's a new startup every week, and they say like, "Oh, we're like 100 million ARR now within a few weeks," and then like they start turning on the cost, like they update pricing, and then they also start going and try to hit enterprise, and then they hit a roadblock, right? So then the question is there actually product market fit, or are you building a product that is like a arbitrage of tokens? People like want to use your product over others. So that is hard to know if you have product market fit in that framing. The way you actually know, well, there's a couple of things. Like one is like you raise the price and you still have the growth. That means you have product market fit. But the second thing is if you're talking to the customers and you are hearing what they need, what are their requirements. And on the enterprise side, like you pass all the security and all the other kind of like checks that maybe not the product has, but like your enterprise version has. Once you like align all those different data points and it works, like that is also another version of product market fit. And that's hard for some of the like initial founders to hear because they might build a product that's really cool and maybe like the free tier is really successful. But then the moment they try to earn revenue on it, that maybe means you don't have product market fit. If you have to charge for it, nobody buys it. That's a interesting question, right? For example, there's a lot of these like calendar softwares that are all free. Like it's great. I can send you a calendar link and you can book my time. But if they start charging for it and I switch over to another one, does that mean there's no product market fit, right? And some of these like meeting notes software, like everybody loves these. Obviously, it's great to have the meeting summarized and take notes. But the moment they raise the price and I just switched to another vendor, does that mean there's no product market fit either, right? So it is like a weird like trade-off between like, is it because the product itself is useful or is it because it's cheap? And I think that is something that founders need to grapple with maybe like later down the line, because in the beginning you kind of have to do the freemium model to get some visibility and usage. And the freemium, by the way, allows you to tweak the product for like maximizing the usage too, because you know the customers, if you make an update, they don't use it, then you don't want to go big on that, right? Like you want the freemium to inform you how to build the product better and better. So yeah, the big trade-off is like when you start doing pricing. But if again you see adoption rapidly spike, that's a good first sign. Then when you're trying to make money on it, that's the second sign.
Yeah, I mean, every sales engineer like that sells to enterprise, especially large enterprise, like, something that you're going to run into is, when you're working with enterprise, they're going to say, hold on, your product doesn't do X and I need X to move forward with the deal. And you say, hold on, now I got to go to product and engineering to see like, can we build this? One, two, should we build this? And three, if we build this, will other customers get the same sort of perceived value out of this for us to even think about building said thing that you want? Whereas in like the freemium model, it's sort of like, just gather as much feedback as you can, build the best, product. Whereas like selling to enterprise is a totally different motion because you have to really meet the customers where they're at in certain cases. And sometimes even as an account team, determine we're going to need to walk away because we shouldn't be building the thing that they want us to. And like, we have to know like when as a business, we have to draw the line to say, this is not something we can move forward with today. Maybe in a year from now, we'll feel differently. But right now, here's where our focus needs to be because here's where we think our biggest product market fit is this right here versus this, sort of one off thing that you want us to do.
Agreed.
I think the hard part with that though is like how do you determine what is worth pursuing? We like especially if I'm working with a big logo, it could be a juicy deal, but on the flip side, it's like they're pulling us in a direction that might not be good for the long-term vision of the company. And I feel like now as like CEO, you have to think about the long-term vision versus like the short term. And how do you grapple with those two sides?
It's always about trade-offs, right? You create a new product, then you have to maintain it. And in some cases, you create a type of product that needs a lot more support or it's a lot harder to sell. But the trade-off is whether you know the revenue is there and whether you will be uncontested going head to head with anybody else. So if you know that you're building a product that is going to win revenue, it's going to be much easier to sell, but requires a lot more work. Is that better than building a product that is very similar to the market and being very hard to sell? And also, you just have no idea what the competition is doing as well, right? Like there's like you have to decide the trade off. You go like much more certain, much more calculated risk, or you go for the high risk and go big. And honestly, it's going to be something in between. Usually, you do both, but you need to like just figure out the timing for both.
Yeah, so much to think about. Well, I know that you are traveling again tomorrow, so I want to make sure you get some rest before you go to the other part of the world. But any last parting thoughts for our guest here?
I think the main thing is have a lot of curiosity and solve problems for your organization. And I think the sales engineer role again is the most like versatile that a lot of people lean on that role and they have a lot of reach across the organization. So make sure you use that reach and again, use that reach to solve problems, learn about the organization and the product. And then again, with that curiosity, you'll be unstoppable, I feel.
Well, Jeff, we really appreciate you joining us and taking the time to chat with us. And for those of you who don't know, you can find him on LinkedIn and any other places that if they want to look at your content, your blogs or anything like that.
I'm also on Twitter. It's just Jeff W Surf. And then, yeah, I have a jeffwang.substack.com. I haven't wrote a blog post in a while. Maybe I should.
Hey, you could always write one on the transition from sales engineering to CEO. If so, let us know. We'll be sure to post it from our channels and make sure to get it in the hands of everybody else.
Thank you. Sounds good.
All right, I'll talk to you
Awesome.
soon,
Well,
Jeff.
thanks so much for joining us, Jeff.
All right. See you guys later. Thanks.
Damn, that was another fun one. I guess
Oh, man.
what are your big takeaways, Ryan?
Man, I really love what Jeff had to say about identification of problems and becoming the person that solves those problems, right? Like, I think it's really interesting because as sales engineers, we do run in individual silos of like the account team that you work in. So like, for me, I support 3 different reps. In theory, I'm in like 3 individual silos of like a larger circle that I'm all a part of and I can connect the dots where like, one rep runs into an issue, second rep runs into it, and I'm like, oh, I've already solved this issue, so I know how to speak about it and all those great things. But like, that's just my, sort of like circle that I live in. Then it branches out to the team that I support. So here's the problems that I've run into. I share that and we knowledge share and we help each other. But again, like you branch out. Now, I think like the important thing that Jeff really drilled into is like, okay, now imagine like in that sphere that you operate in, you find a problem that you're running into that's just like bothering you. You're like, oh man, I keep doing this exact same thing over and over and over again. If you could be the person that solves for that, odds are the other teammates that you have in sales engineers, like they're going to also have those same problems. So if you build the automation around it, now you've helped out the whole organization automate something. Or like it could have a bigger impact elsewhere. It's like, that's how you get, a seat at the table, right? You're no longer just the technical resource that answers technical questions for prospects. You're now the technical business savvy resource that said, hey, I noticed this problem. I solve for it. Like business gets a ton of value out of that. And the value I get is now people internally know who I am because they say, Ryan was able to solve for this. And I think one example I'll kind of like pair this with is, similar like when you and I were working together was like during my time, like early on, we started a pilot, and like I'd run this pilot, and it was months and months of work, and it was my time plus engineering plus our machine learning engineers. And eventually, like towards like the final stages of that deal, like I started to really think to myself, if we don't win this deal, like this has cost the business a ton of money because like the resource hours that have gone into it. And so good news is like we won the pilot, but moving forward, I had to really think to myself, it's not sustainable for us to run pilots in the current facet that we have to run them. So like, how do we work around that? How do we sell around that? And then drawing up a new game plan to say like, here's what that process needs to look like for the time being for deals up to this value. And then building that across the sales org is like, that helped get a lot of exposure and say like, oh wow, we're fixing a sales process and making it better and effectively selling versus just saying like, hey, let's do this larger pilot. And this pilot's going to take you 4 months and you're going to sink 200 hours between your time and engineering. Like, it's just like the deal size has to be so large for that to make sense. And so I encourage a lot of you like listening and even myself, like I'm right now like spinning my wheels, like where are the problems that I can help solve for and automate to make everybody's life a little bit better. And like, again, that will only help out, your career.
Yeah, as I'm listening to you talk about this, it reminds me to start thinking instead of just like I am an individual SC, like if I was the business owner and like what you just said, this is costing the business a lot of money, time, resources. As soon as you start thinking of it in that facet, I feel like that's like will help you identify where are there gaps that need to be filled because we're sinking so much. If every SC is spending 5 hours doing this one thing for every POC that we're doing, and we have 50 SCs, like, and on the low side, it's there's 150 pop, like, you can do the math and realize that there's like 7 figures right there of a problem and do kind of some back of the envelope thinking. But I think it requires you to go from this is my lane, these are my deals that I'm working on to how does this fit into like the broader spectrum of the business and how can I help the business become more efficient? Because there's so many places that you can help the business become more efficient.
And Jeff gave a great example of this too, right? Like he said, like, oh, one thing I realized is that our team was spending a lot of time going and running like customer health checks, right? And all it was basically pulling the same report or a version of that report that everybody was looking at. Oh, I built an automation around it where now I simply type in customer name and I get the full 360-degree view of the account health. That alone in 1 week has now saved the team, depending on the size, tens of hours, hundreds of hours. Like one automation led to hundreds of hours of ROI in a month. Like now you really establish yourself. I think it's one trap though that a lot of SEs unfortunately fall into is this like realm of I am the technical resource. And as soon as you continue branding yourself that way, that's what the business sees you as. So like you get on and you do deal reviews with like the larger team and you hop in and you're just like, hey, everybody, I'm Ryan, technical resource. Here's what we did to technically win this thing. Okay, well, that's all they ever see you as,
Yeah.
right? Versus, hey, like I'm a technical resource, but I'm also a strategist towards the business and a strategist towards, the pod that I operate in from the account team. And like, here's what we did, right? Like we sat down and we thought about the way we were going to price this, the way that we were going to pitch this. We thought about the way that our executive review was going to be. And all those little details are really like what set us up for success, not necessarily all the little like minute technical details that you do. And then say like, oh, by the way, though, as a part of this, guess what I saw? I solved this piece. And because I solved this piece, now the rest of the team doesn't have to run into this same problem because I've knowledge shared this, right? Like I ran into this. I figured out we didn't have this. I built this workaround. Now I've shared it with my team. So that way, when they ultimately run into this on the next deal they're on, they get to say, hold on, my teammate actually already solved for this. This is the workaround they proposed. How does that sound to you, Mr. or Mrs. Customer? Amazing. That sounds great. You're no longer a technical resource. Like you are a legit business strategist. And now
Hmm.
you're starting to get your voice at the table where like QBR season rolls around. Like, guess who they turn to? Hey, what do you think about these deals and opportunities? Like you're no longer just the, hey, what do you think about this technical challenge that, so and so's facing on this account?
And honestly, that's like, personally, that's where a lot of the fun is at of the actual, like, oh, there's this gap in the business. It's causing us a lot of pain. Like, I hate doing this type of work. I'm sure other people hate doing this type of work. How do we make it better? And then you're That's where I found I've gotten the most exposure. It's not like I'm doing, oh, I crushed a demo this one time. It's like we came out with a new product line. I tried a new way of demoing it. It worked for 3 customers, and then I recorded it and I shared it with the team. I was like, hey, I tried this. It's been working. Like, try, why don't you guys try it? Let me know how it goes. It's usually how these things start up. And then all of a sudden, like I hear after I left the company, they're still talking about that particular way of demoing, like at the most recent QBR. I was like, what? Like I kind of just did it on a whim and it ended up working out. But you have to just try new things. And I think if you start thinking like a business owner versus just an IC, that's helped me change my perspective. Another thing that I thought was super interesting, and I think Ryan, me and you get this question all the time, like, hey, how do I break into sales engineering?
Yeah.
I've got no sales engineering experience, blah, blah, blah. What Jeff did to tackle that exact problem, there's your playbook. You
Mhm.
want to break into a particular industry, you're going to go learn about the industry already. You might as well document it and just put it online. Like, just post it on LinkedIn, post it on Substack. If you have a website, put it there. Like, just a place to be. Whether one person reads it, 10 people read it, 100 people read it, like, it's showing that you are starting to build domain expertise within whatever you're interested in. And you can do the same thing with like sales engineering, if that's like the domain you want to focus on, or if you want to focus on a particular vertical. As an SC, we have to be good at sales, we have to be good at technology, we have to understand the like functional vertical. So if you can pick one of those three and show that you've done personal work and research and information gathering, that's going to help you stand out. And I feel like literally Jeff did, he's like, I don't have any AI expert, like, because I want to go into the AI field. All right, I'm just going to go explore things that are interesting in AI and document it. And all of a sudden he walks into an interview and they're like, oh, that's the guy who did that thing in AI, because it's a very niche place. And like, that's where the place he wanted to play in. So I think that was
If
it.
you want it, you got to make it happen. And look, you know, you're right. You and I get hit up a lot about like, hey, I want to break into sales engineering, or hey, I want to move from this vertical to the next vertical. If you want it, now is the time. You have to make it happen. There are tons of free tooling that's out there for you to try these things out. You know, a Claude subscription, an OpenAI subscription, they're $20 a month. So like if you want to break into AI, guess what? Start there. Like start playing around with these tools, build something cool, and use that as your frame of reference for when you interview. I've literally met with somebody before that was like, hey, I want to be an AI sales engineer. And I was like, great. Like, what experience do you have with AI tools? Well, I've played around with it like a couple of times for like some cookbook stuff. And I'm like, no, like that can't be the answer. Like your answer has got to be, well, look, I've played around with all these tools. Here's what I've done. I've built this. I've done this. I have this, you know, running this operation. I built a, you know, mobile application game, whatever it is. Like you got to play around with those tools to really understand them. And look, like I'll like hand up, I can attest to that because you know, when I was going through, you know, my process of getting hired, one thing that came up was like, hey, like, what's your experience with RAG architecture? And I was like, guess what? Like, I built a mini RAG, right, using custom GPTs. And it's like, speak to that sort of experience. And guess what? It's like, oh, Ryan isn't somebody that just wants it. He's somebody that is also like doing the work in tandem to make sure that he's understanding where the technology is to be able to do this. And he can come and he can learn more. And so, like, that's where I think especially now, like I feel like we've talked about this too. We're like resume eaters, like out there in the world, like it's just AI to AI. Like your ability to get noticed in like a blind resume process is very slim. Like you have got to network your way in, and the best way that you can do that is like find a hiring manager, find somebody at the company, and send them an article to like, here is what I have done, and here's why I would be a good fit. That's awesome. Like this is such a great, I'm happy you brought that up for us to like recap on because if you're looking for a job or you want to get to the next place that you're at, go make it happen. You want to be an SE at Salesforce? Go make it happen. Free, trailhead. Like go do it. There's
Yeah,
no reason not to. There's really no reason not to. So
Salesforce is a prime example. They have free training for all of Trailhead. As you're going through Trailhead, write about it. I've learned X, Y, Z. Oh, this is weird. I don't understand why they do it that way. I would have done it this way. Have an opinion. And all of a sudden, like you're interviewing for Salesforce, maybe the person who's interviewing is also in the Salesforce ecosystem. They are probably looking at things related to this niche, and they could have come across your work. Or you now actually can have a deeper conversation of, well, hey, like Salesforce just launched all of these agents? Or like, did you see what's going on with Slack and they're trying to push the AI stuff? Like, tell me more about like where that product is going. And all of a sudden you have like a deeper layer to dive into.
Yeah, I feel like I always bring up the Salesforce one because like I know it's free and it helped me get to where I wanted to go. Like originally, I thought when I would go and do the free Salesforce training, like the goal and end goal was to be a Salesforce specific SE, right? And when that didn't pan out, I was pretty bummed. I'm like, oh man, I've done all this work, but guess what? When the other employers were looking at my body of work, they said, wow, it's really impressive that you went and did this. Well, your propensity to learn must be pretty high. If you could go get certified admin over there in X amount of time, well, then I know you could be a certified admin over here in no time. So even though you might not think it's going to help out, I'm telling you right now, like it will help out. But don't do like the BS little badges that are out there. Like there are badges that bring you no value like on the internet for like different trainings that are out there. Go get like industry specific ones that are actually going to help you out, not one that like you take a 5 bullet quiz and then they're like, oh hey look Ryan, you earned this badge, AI knowledge person. It's like, no, like go get an industry specific badge that like people are going to recognize. Spend the time, spend the money. Like in certain cases you will have to spend the money to like get those sort of certifications. But yeah, like overall, you can make it happen and like you can brand yourself into something totally different. Like I didn't know anything about ERPs. I knew about accounts payable, but not to the level of like where I needed to. And, like when it came to like really investing into like cutting edge AI, like again, like wasn't an industry expert on it, but all these things like I've spent the time, energy, and effort to research and practice and get really good at. And you can do it too. Like these tools are out there. If you're not using them, somebody else is. Like somebody else is putting in the work.
Yeah, it's never been easier to tinker. And I thought it was funny just to hear Jeff talk about like the options trading bot. That's such a
Which I
classic.
want in on too, by the way. Like, Jeff, after you hear this recap, wouldn't mind Diary of a Sales Engineer getting a position on there, but okay.
I think I think why that one is like interesting is because there's also real stakes. Like it's like, hey, I built this. I have so much trust in it that I'm willing to throw actual my hard-earned money to test it out and see if it works. And that's why like a story like that or a project like that, it's going to if someone told me that they built an option trading bot, I want to know more. Like if you are building something for fun, like, one needs to solve a problem that you probably have. And two, if it's interesting enough, it's like don't just end there. Like, how did you make it? Like, what's your strategy? Like, how did you figure all of this out? And then I loved his answer of, well, there's just a lot of new things. And so I'm trying to keep up with learning the new things. So I'm just building some stuff for myself because I'm one, learning, and two, I have this problem and maybe I could solve it with our latest and greatest.
Yeah, I think that's like an interesting call out too, right? It's not necessarily about just playing around with the tools, like play around with a purpose. Like, I don't know, like, whenever Replit came out a couple years ago, I want to say, like,
Yeah.
it was, yeah, I think it was 2 years ago. And it kind of took the internet by storm. And I was like, what is this tool? Like, why do people use it? And I was like, oh, okay, I want to check it out. And so I went on there and I started playing around, like, but I went on there with a purpose. I was like, can I try to build a UI framework for a mobile application game? And started just like playing around, maxing out my tokens every day until like I got to a level of being like, wow, like if I really were to sink time, effort, and energy into this, like I could create a real game and publish it to the to App Store. Like this is like a real thing that I could do. But again, it was more for me to just like get better knowledge of what was happening for natural language conversion into, back end code. And so like, again, small little project, little purpose behind it. Doesn't necessarily have to be like something so complex as like an option trade. Like you can start at a lower level. Like if you're passionate about something, build something around that passion that you have. Like Samir is, super into plants and gardening. Like, create a knowledge bot on all things like herbology, right? And just say like, hey, I have this specific plant. Like, tell me how to take care of it. And then there's a little like AI chatbot, or like, hey, my plant I noticed is dying. Like, here's the specific type of plant I have. Here's how long I've had it for. Give me some instructions for how to make it better. Like, that's a project where you'll be passionate about building because you are interested in it.
Yeah. And if you really have no inspiration, just rebuild one of the big SaaS companies. Go remake a CRM. Go make your own ITSM. Like, go try and replicate XYZ billion-dollar company. with vodka and you'll learn a bunch. I think my example was even our like Diary of a Sales Engineer website. Like it's not just a static website front end. I built a whole back end in order for it to be easy for us to upload our videos where like I learned how to connect a database. I learned how to accept payments. I learned how to actually set up Rails. So if we ever do get into like a user name, password kind of gated community type of thing, I was like, I want to learn how to do this. I have no idea how to do it. YouTube plus ChatGPT plus Windsurf plus Claude Code. Like I used them all in order to figure out how to get there. But now our website production, we don't have to go and change the code at all. We just go and literally copy and paste the YouTube link into the site and it auto extracts everything. And it's like, oh, wow, this is one. It's like, okay, what's my problem? How do I design it from a product level? Now that I've designed it from the product level, okay, how do I leverage the tools? Like I had never done like, that was like a pretty like much a mini full stack project, right? You have front end, you have back end, and then add the server side to go back and forth. You will have problems like that that you can solve that you can learn how to use the technology and then be able to talk about it and tell a story.
So some final thoughts for me, like one thing that we didn't really discuss too much on, but I know it's coming for us is like the sort of distinction between AE, deployment engineer, engagement engineer, delta engineer. Like it was super cool to find out that sort of like org structure for them and how they're retitling and renaming things. So I think we can officially add deployment engineer into the same category as sales engineering, just another title for the name. But like I think and we have plans around this, really diving deeper into like what makes a deployment engineer, a great deployment engineer. And so we have some interesting plans for that coming up this year on a future episode for us. So I don't want to go like too far into it today, but super interesting to hear that org structure continuing to take place. Like, we just had James on recently. We talked about the sort of collapsing of these roles into different things. I think we're going to continue to see this shift pretty rapidly over 26. And we covered that a little bit on our wrap up podcast this year. But final thoughts for me is like this role is changing. The names are changing too. So I think it's important to really understand like what side of sales engineering you want to get into, but keep on being broad and curious, like Jeff said. Like keep your skill set broad. So if you have an opportunity to get pulled into a different direction, take it,
Yeah,
learn it,
learn.
get the experience.
Yeah. I thought it was also really interesting that Jeff was saying that those roles are now deal winners. And like that's the differentiator is if you have someone who's in that role and who can do a good job in that role, which is telling me that the SE role is only going to become more and more prevalent and necessary in order to even differentiate your product in order to sell more. So I think it's a very, very exciting time for our industry. And you have a lot that we're going to be spilling into and just, I'm excited. I think it's an exciting time for sure. All right. Well, with that, I will hope you guys, we'll see you all later.
Yeah. See you everyone.
Peace.